Okay. All right, we're back in. Okay, so now we're going to get started on chapter 13. So all of chapter 12, again, remember, was about our innate immune system. I did start recording again. It's about the innate immune system. It's the things that are ingrained into your body, and they attack in a very non-specific way. Now we're moving on to the second half of your immune system, which is the adaptive immunity. And the adaptive immune system, so if this was all chapter 12, was all of this innate immune system stuff. Now we're moving on to the adaptive immune system. Now the adaptive immune system, remember, only really occurs if the innate immune system fails. So the adaptive immune system is only going to be triggered if something gets past all of your innate defenses. All of those first lines of defenses, all of those second lines of defenses. If something manages to survive all of those things, then the adaptive immune system will be triggered. Okay? And it's important to remember that most things don't make it past those first two lines of defenses. The vast majority of bacteria and microbes that you come in contact with every day are stopped by those first two lines of defenses. Okay, but if those two lines fail, and they do sometimes, there are bacteria that are smarter than us, okay, and viruses that are smarter than us. If something makes it past those first two lines of defenses, the adaptive immune system is what will kick in. Okay, so that's the first part, or the first thing of note in the adaptive immune system, is I want you to notice the timeline at the bottom. So for the innate immune system are things that happen either immediately or shortly after exposure, within a couple of hours. Some of it doesn't require any time at all, right? Like your skin is an innate defense. That doesn't require time. It just is, right? That requires zero time. Okay, but something like phagocytosis and inflammation, that can take a couple of hours to kick in. But the innate immune system, for the most part, requires very little time. They are ingrained processes that happen without any type of signal needed or change needed or adaptation needed. They're just innate to your body. The adaptive immune system takes many, many days to even start to kick in. And again, that should make sense because this is what happens after those first lines of defense fail. Okay. So the adaptive immune system in general takes more time. And the key words that I'm going to say over and over and over that have to do with the adaptive immune system, the words that you want to remember are specificity, and memory. Okay, and we're going to talk more about what those mean as we go through, but those are the big keys to the adaptive immune system. Your adaptive immune system is called that because it adapts and changes as you move through your life. As you're exposed to different things, your adaptive immune system will change and grow with you. And your adaptive immune system is specific. So the innate immune system were a bunch of non-specific alarm systems, right? It's putting up a fence in your yard and an alarm on your door if it's opened. Those are non-specific protections. The adaptive immune system is specific. It attacks specific pathogens. And it learns which pathogens you come in contact with as you come in contact with them. So the adaptive immunity is the whole basis of vaccines. Okay, and we're going to talk about vaccines a lot in this chapter, but it's the whole basis of vaccines. Vaccines teach your adaptive immune system how to fight off specific infections. That's kind of the overall thing there. Is your adaptive immune system responds to the things that it sees. So when it sees an infection, it learns how to kill that specific infection. Okay? It changes, it learns. So it has specificity, so it kills specific microbes, okay, down to the specific strain. And it has memory, which means that it's going to remember. It's going to remember the things that you have come in contact with, and it is going to stop you from being sick with them in the future. It's the same way that I had the chicken pox when I was 4 years old. I'm never going to have chicken pox again because my immune system learned how to fight off chicken pox the first time I had it. My immune system adapted to that specific pathogen, and now it's not going to let me get sick with it again because it remembers. So it's adaptive, it's specific, and it has memory. Those are kind of the three big words associated with the adaptive immune response. And we are going to talk about all of this in specific. We're going to talk about how that happens at each stage. And this is kind of where this really starts to get a little dicey. People start to get really lost in this chapter. And it can be confusing, but this is one of those subjects that I'm just going to warn you, you kind of have to stick with until the end, okay? Because we're going to be talking about all of these things that are kind of happening at the same time, and we're going to be jumping around a lot, and a lot of it may be confusing as we're going through it, but then at the end, we're going to wrap it up into a little package, and hopefully it makes a little bit more sense when we get to the end. So this first part can feel overwhelming the first time you're learning it, but it's one of those things just you have to stick with me, and hopefully, by the time we get to the end, it makes a little bit more sense. So if you're confused as we're going through this first part, don't be too alarmed. Most people are, but we're going to tie it in a nice little bow at the end, hopefully. Okay? All right, so it's the adaptive immune system, the overview of the adaptive immune system. Okay, so just like everything else, I feel like I say this with everything, the adaptive immune system has two categories. There are two types of adaptive immune system, or what we call arms of the immune system. People call them the two arms, like arms, of the adaptive immune system. We have the humoral arm, or the humoral response, and the cell-mediated response. And we're going to talk about both of these in specific. We're going to go through the stages of each one and how they interact with each other and how they produce the response that we want. But first, we're going to talk about them kind of generically. So in the adaptive immune system, again, I already talked about this stuff, but the adaptive immune system is specific and it's typically slower. We talked about that on the last page. But the adaptive immune system, when we were talking about the innate immune system, we were talking about the phagocytes. We were talking about mostly neutrophils, dendritic cells, and macrophages, right? Those are the phagocytes. Now we're talking about a different group of white blood cells that are called lymphocytes. And lymphocytes are agranulocytes. Okay, so they're another type of agranulocyte. And there are two types. We have B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. But lymphocytes are the main, the main components, I guess, of the adaptive immune system. And the humoral response has to do with the B cells. So the B cells, the B lymphocytes, also known as B cells, B lymphocytes, B cells, are going to control the humoral response. And the T cells are going to control the cell-mediated response. Now, again, remember, both of these are part of the adaptive immune system, but they're controlled by different types of cells. The humoral side is going to be controlled by B cells, and the cell-mediated side is going to be controlled by T cells. Now, again, I'm going to tell you what the overall purpose of each side is, and then we're going to talk about each step. So again, it's one of those, you got to stick with me, okay? So the B cells, their biggest purpose, the purpose of a B cell, the overall purpose of a B cell, is to produce things called antibodies, which I know is a word you've heard before. We're going to talk a lot more about them in just a minute. But B cells produce antibodies. That's their main purpose. And antibodies, in general, are going to go on, and in ways that we will talk about in a little while, cause pathogen destruction. Okay. So B cells produce antibodies. T cells produce cytokines that do a couple of different things. The biggest things that they do, the first one is that they help B cells. Okay, so those cytokines that the T cells release are going to help B cells. That's a big part of what they do. So they affect the humoral side of this response as well. But these cytokines are also going to cause it is going to cause the death of cells that are infected. Okay, so cells that are infected within our human body, it is going to cause direct death of those cells that are infected, which in turn leads to the death of the microorganisms that are inside of those cells. Okay, so again, we're going to talk about each step and we're going to go through both sides. But the B side overall produces antibodies, which kill pathogens. The T cells produce cytokines, which help the B cells, but also cause induce cell death of infected cells. Okay? And so that is what happens when your body is infected with something. This is how your immune system gets rid of that. It's got two ways of doing it, produces antibodies and also produces these cytokines that kill infected cells. It's important to remember that both of these are going to be happening at the same time. Okay, and we're going to go through them and we're going to talk about them happening at the same time. But they kind of have to diverge and they go down two separate paths and then they kind of come together to produce one final product. Okay, so that's what I mean by it getting a little weird, because you're talking about two separate paths that are happening at the same time, and then they come back together, they cross over, can get a little weird. Okay? All right, so this giant picture, and I know it's a giant picture and it's impossible to see up here, but it is also in your textbook, but this chart or diagram is one that you'll want to come back to as we go through this. Okay, so this is the overview of what happens on both sides of the immune system. Okay, so we have the B cell line and the T cell line, and what happens on each side and what they do, okay, and how they are induced and the things that they cause to happen. And again, we're going to talk about each of these stages. Notice that there are 4 stages, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to talk about each of those stages as it relates to the humoral side and the cell-mediated side. But this is a great diagram to come back to kind of rearrange it all for yourself, or I guess it's like a really good outline of what we're going to talk about. Okay, it's a really good picture that shows everything that happens in this process in one picture. Okay. And again, the key things in this image for now are that we have 2 separate types of lymphocytes, right? We have the B cell side and we have the T cell side. And those things that we just talked about, we're going to go through all of this, but notice that the B cell side, B cells produce antibodies. That's the purpose of the major B cell side. Okay. And then the T cell side, we have these T cells. Notice right here that it's helping the B cells. So that's one thing that it does. It helps the B cells. And then these cells down here are going to kill infected cells. We're going to talk about that more in specific in a minute. But again, there's 2 separate arms. They are both activated at the same time, and they occur simultaneously. That's why they're shown side by side like this. It's not one after the other. They're happening at the same time. And this is what happens inside your body after something makes it past that first line of defense. First and second line of defense. Makes it past your innate immune system. Okay. So before we can talk about the specifics of the stages and what happens at each stage, we have to talk about something called the major histocompatibility complex. And from now on, I'm just going to refer to this as the MHC. You can refer to it as that way too. Most textbooks would just refer to it as the MHC, but it does stand for major histocompatibility complex. And what the major histocompatibility complex is, or the MHC is it's a set of cell markers that play a vital role in the recognition of self. So MHC class 1, which is the major histocompatibility complex class 1, is a marker unique to each human. And it is found on all human cells except red blood cells. Okay? So every single cell inside of your body has an MHC class 1 protein that is unique to you. Okay, your MHC1 is different than my MHC1. It's different than everybody else's MHC1. It's what makes you an individual person, and it's how your immune system, a big part of how your immune system knows what belongs to you. Because this MHC, it's like we each have our own individual names, right? Or social security numbers, or whatever you want to think of our individual identifiers. It is something that exists on almost every cell in your body, except for red blood cells, that tells your body that that cell belongs. Okay, it's a little flag that your cells all wave that say, yes, I belong here. Okay, and it's individual to each and every person. Okay. So every cell in your body, except for red blood cells, will have an MHC class 1. It is a marker unique to you. It is how your body identifies your cells. Okay? Now, the MHC class 2 is an immune marker, and these are cells found only on macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells. Okay, and we're going to talk more about these macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells in just a little while. But they have something called an MHC class 2 protein, and it's specific to these 3 cell types. And we're going to talk about what that does and what that means in a little while. But for now, you just have to know that every cell in your human body has an MHC class 1, except for red blood cells, and that MHC class 1 is unique to you. And then these 3 specific immune cells, these are all white blood cells, macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells, will have an MHC class 2 marker. Okay. So notice this is a class 1 MHC molecule found on all nucleated human cells. Something to note, though, is that MHC class 2s are found on some types of white blood cells, specifically macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells. But macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells are cells in your human body that are not red blood cells. So remember that those macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells will also have an MHC class 1 because they are cells. So they also have an MHC class 1. So those macrophages, dendritic cells, and B cells have both an MHC class 1 and an MHC class 2. All other cells only have an MHC class 1. Okay. So we're going to talk about the job of the MHC class 2 in specific in just a little while, but you have to know those definitions first. Okay. So we're going to cover a couple of more definitions before we get into the different stages. The next one is something called differentiation and proliferation. So, and again, these are words that are not going to make much sense right now, but I have to introduce it to you now, and we're going to talk more about it in just a couple slides. So when presented with an antigen, lymphocytes will create many genetically identical clones. So that is proliferation. So when a lymphocyte, a B lymphocyte or a T lymphocyte, doesn't matter, are presented with a specific antigen, they will create many genetically identical copies of themselves. And why that's important, we'll talk about more in a second. But you have to know that definition of proliferation. Okay? All right, so stage 1. Yeah, we're just going to talk about this real fast, and then we'll probably be done. So stage 1 is the development of lymphocyte diversity. So what I mean by stage 1 is it's stage 1 over here back on this chart. So everything that I'm talking about goes back to this chart, stage 1 through 4. So stage 1, the development of lymphocyte diversity. Now, what I mean by that, lymphocyte diversity, is your body has a really cool, not just your body, human immune systems have a really, really cool effect. And a big part of how they work is that every lymphocyte responds to one specific antigen. Okay, remember how I said that specificity is the key to this adaptive immune system. And this is a big part of it. Every single one of the lymphocytes inside your body, both B cells and T cells, respond to one and only one specific antigen. It's like each individual lymphocyte is on the lookout for something specific. Okay? So instead of looking at all of the individual things that could be wrong, each individual cell is given one job and one job only, and that is to look for one specific antigen. Okay, we're going to talk more about what an antigen is in a minute, but an antigen is basically anything. Okay, it's just something that is unique to a specific cell, be a protein, a sugar, anything else. But every single lymphocyte in your body responds to one and only one antigen. It is specific. And it is estimated, remember you don't have to remember numbers, but it is estimated that each human produces B and T lymphocytes with 10 trillion different specificities. Okay, so floating around inside your blood right now, you have 10 trillion different lymphocytes that each respond to one antigen. Okay, it's like the definition of specializing, right? Instead of having a few lymphocytes that respond to a bunch of different stuff, you have one that responds to one specific thing and only that specific thing. Okay, and that is the key to all of this adaptive immune system. Okay, so lymphocyte diversity. So B and T cell development. B's and T cells are named this because of where they developed. T cells mature in the thymus. And the thymus is an organ, I think it's an organ, gland, that sits above the heart. So if you've ever seen a picture of a thymus, I think it looks like a little hat sitting right on top of your heart. Okay, it's like a triangular shaped organ that sits right on top of your heart, and it produces your T cells. Thymus, T cells, thymus. Your B cells mature in your bone marrow. So your bone marrow is on the insides of all of your long bones. They're produced all over your body. But B cells, bone marrow. Okay. And B cells and T cells, so that's what the thymus looks like. Your heart sits right here. So each of these B cells and T cells, now remember again that these are not red blood cells, so all of them are going to have MHC class 1. Okay. And each of these is going to have some kind of receptor. So T cells have T cell receptors, B cells they are B cell receptors, but they of course get a fancy name called an immunoglobulin, which you're gonna see on the next page. It's more organized on the next page, but I wanted to show you this picture first. And a receptor is it's usually a protein that recognizes and grabs a specific antigen. Okay, so both B cells and T cells have receptors, and these receptors are things that recognize and bind or grab one specific antigen. They usually have a very specific shape. Notice this is a T cell receptor right here, and the only antigen that is going to fit in that specific T cell receptor is one that is that exact shape. Okay? And remember that each and every T cell and B cell has a different receptor specific to one particular antigen. So each T cell and each B cell will have a different receptor on it that is specific to different antigens. Okay. All right, so this is just kind of written out that the immunologic diversity, each B cell and each T cell is specifically designed to respond to a different antigen. Okay. B cell receptors are called immunoglobulins. I don't know why they get a fancy name, but they do. B cell receptors are called immunoglobulins, and when those receptors are released into the bloodstream, they are called antibodies. So B cells are capable of releasing their receptors, and when they're not on the cell surface, they're called antibodies. T cell receptors don't get any special names, and they cannot release If everybody could wait, I still have one more minute. It gets really distracting when you're all packing up at once, please. Okay, so B cells have immunoglobulins. When those immunoglobulins are released, they are called antibodies. T cell receptors don't have any special name. They are just called T cell receptors, and they cannot be released into the bloodstream. Okay, and again, each B cell and each T cell is specifically designed to respond to a different antigen. And that is immunologic diversity, that each and every B cell responds to something different. Each one is diverse. It is different from every other B cell or T cell that exists. Okay, and that happens, you don't have to know the specific, but that happens through a really cool mechanism in transcription where you have all of these genes. Here they've coded them in different colors, and the genes for the immunoglobulins and the T cell receptors have all of these colors, and then as it's transcribed, it will pick and choose which color to add. Okay, so every single receptor has a different collection of colors, basically, in any order and in any number. And that's what makes each and every receptor different from the others. Okay? All right, that's where we'll pick up next time. Thank you for waiting.